So good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's Light at the End of the Tunnel webinar. My name is Bob Evans, and I'll be joined this morning by my colleague Jack Spoor and guests Nevil Tynemouth and Chris Turner. So the last 14 months or so have been tough on all of us as restrictions are being gradually lifted. The time's right for a more positive message. And we hope that this morning's webinar will be enlightening and maybe even inspiring. So a quick look at the agenda for this morning. We're not expecting this session to last any more than an hour, and we will be recording the session to send out to you afterwards, so please be aware of that if you'd rather remain anonymous. We'll start with a brief introduction section and then hand over to Nevil Tynemouth for his Creating a Business Development Focus in Your Business talk. This will be followed by a short Making the Most of Opportunities section before our interview with Chris Turner. And we'll finish off with Jack Spoor running through some growth tools and summarizing the session. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of Nevil and Chris's sections, but feel free to post any questions in the chat box as we go along. So a quick thought for the day from Brenda Cass: no matter how far you are in the tunnel, there will always be light at the end. And I think we can all agree that this COVID tunnel has been particularly long and most would say gloomy, but we are now at last experiencing some brightness, which supported by the vaccine program should see us back to relative normality by the end of June. So this is a photo of the old lady of Threadneedle Street, otherwise known as the Bank of England, along with a pleasing splash of blue sky ahead. Now, the bank stated last week that Britain is on track for the strongest growth since the Second World War this year, as it stages a faster than expected recovery from the COVID pandemic. The bank raised its estimate for UK GDP growth, GDP growth from its previous estimate in February of 5% to 7.25% this year. And as restrictions are lifted, it paves the way for a boom in pent-up demand. This growth rate would be the fastest since the 8.7% expansion in 1941, when production was being pushed to the limit during the Second World War. However, it follows a collapse of almost 10% in 2020, the worst decline for more than 3 centuries. Put into context, it's generally thought that the ideal GDP growth rate is between 2% and 3%, so the forecast growth is way ahead of the norm. Now, this next slide is also from the Bank of England and illustrates 2 things. Firstly, the disproportionate effect that the pandemic has had on the finances of the poorest in our society, but also that overall savings have increased as spending opportunities were restricted during the various lockdowns. And although I don't have the data to hand, it's believed that a similar picture emerges when looking at the finances of businesses. Some sectors have clearly been more affected than others, but overall, across the business community, cash reserves have increased. And this reinforces the view that there is pent-up demand, both for business to consumer and business to business, and that there are cash resources available to stoke the engine of the economy. So 3 things to look for in post-COVID business opportunities. Right now, it's vital to strengthen connections with your existing customers. Their habits and preferences are rapidly changing due to the pandemic, and you must show them that your business is meeting them where they are now. Examine all the ways that you connect and do business with your customers, especially when it comes to social distancing, online ordering, and no or low contact services. Pay particular attention to the ways you are not communicating with your customers now. In the new normal, businesses must be able to connect with customers remotely and vice versa. Examine your existing business plan and infrastructure and identify what other products or services you are equipped to offer, and expand or diversify your business now. What existing equipment, trained staff, transportation network, and more can you adapt to offer a new, different product or service? Find a need that fits your existing operation and fill it. And look at your business through your customers' eyes. What do they need right now to increase their peace of mind or give them added reassurance as we emerge from COVID-19? Think about the ways you can alter your marketing, web presence, and branding to bolster that trust and reassurance. They need to know that they are safer doing business with a pandemic recovery prepared business like you. Reimagining and changing your business is not going to be easy, but don't give up. Just because you used to operate a certain way doesn't mean it's the best opportunity in these difficult times. And just because things have changed doesn't mean that your opportunities for success are now limited. In fact, the opportunities right now are enormous. Open your mind to all the possible ideas to adapt, stay nimble, and reinvent your business for success that will span many years ahead. And now I'm delighted to be able to introduce Nevil Tynemouth. Nevil has helped thousands of people become more comfortable and competent in their business development and selling skills. He was involved with the sales launch of both Dyson and BlackBerry. He helped a corporate organization achieve over $1 billion in new revenue. A published author and international speaker, he now runs New Results, a business designed to help you have more impact with your business development and sales. And today, Nevil is here today to help you in creating a business development focus in your business.
Excellent, Bob. Thank you kindly for that. Good morning, one and all. I'm got a couple of things to share for you, and I'm going to keep this hopefully really straightforward. Can everybody see that slide okay? That should make brilliant. There we go. So that's what we're talking about today, creating a business development focus. Why do we need to do that right now? Well, this whole concept, this whole idea of light at the end of the tunnel. And it's funny how your mind kind of leaps to something. And as soon as Bob shared this title with me, the bit that leapt to mind was light at the end of the time tunnel. You know, when you drive through the time tunnel, you emerge and it's like really bright light. That's what I originally thought. And it's like, wow. And what it made me think, and this is a little kind of link in my brain, you've got to, and this sounds a bit, I'm scratching this a bit here, work with me. You come out of the time tunnel, you kind of know roughly where you're going, but it's a bit disorientating and you tend to slow down a little bit. So the whole idea about the light at the end of the tunnel is being prepared, having a bit of a plan, knowing where we're going, and understanding how to make the most of that opportunity to get out of toll booth faster than everybody else and get away faster than everybody else. What I'm going to do today is just share a few thoughts, ideas, and concepts that we've used. It's a really quick rattle through, which I'm not going to apologize for because that's done deliberately. But what we do is we ease you in nice and simply with this really simple, non-controversial slide to say there's nothing in life you have to do. Nice and easy, Bob said, ease them in, don't just go gently, make sure nobody's kind of there. And this is my light at the end of the tunnel. This is my walk at the back of Lambton. And this photograph I took a couple of weeks ago now in the sunshine. This is my light at the end of the tunnel in lockdown and getting out there and getting exercise. And this particular phrase is really important when it comes to sales and business development specifically. Why is this important? Well, number one, what we tend to do as human beings is change and shape our behavior based on what we've learned, our experiences, our assumptions, and the things that we had going on in the past. They shape some of our current behavior. And more often than not, we're not actually aware of this. And the reason I include this, and there's a whole bigger discussion here, but the reason I include this is when it comes to sales and business development, most organizations kind of know what they should be doing. Most individuals go, yeah, I know what I should be doing. But very often those same people don't actually do those things. They make a choice to do the opposite in some cases, which I find fascinating. So I'm really keen to understand and explore some of the behavioral choices that you're making, both individually for you and for your business, to see that you're getting in the right space. And starting right now to understand that is really going to help you grow and develop personally, but also help your business grow and strengthen and make the most of the ongoing opportunity. I'm a big fan of clarity, and I thought this really brought this to life really, really well. This is the biggest issue that you're going to be facing when it comes to getting that focus and getting that clarity and really zooming down into what you need to achieve. And this is the issue that you're going to face, your team face, your businesses face, and the issue that we're all kind of confronted with. And I hope at least one person's looked at that slide going, I can't believe you put that up. This is the bit for me. We all have so much going on in our lives, so many different things from a personal perspective, a business, work, friends, colleague, family, personal bits. we all need to make sure that we maintain and develop a really strong sense of focus. There's a lovely little story. It's in a book by a lady called Alice Schroeder, The Butterfly, and she wrote about Warren Buffett. And as it turns out, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates were at Bill Gates's house one night having dinner. And one of Bill Gates's parents asked every business owner around this really impressive table of business owners in America, if you had to attribute your business success to a single word, what would that word be? And independently, both Bill Gates and Warren Buffett chose the word focus. So I love the fact today that we are focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel, and we are focusing on business development and where we go with that. So I want to give you, hopefully, if we get there, 5 tips. If we don't get there, it might be 3. Let's see how we do. 5 key tips to really help you develop that focus. And Bob was kind enough to mention, yes, I was involved with the launch of BlackBerry. Yes, I do still have that original BlackBerry in the box. What I like to call that is my retirement plan. I'm hoping that's worth something soon. If it's not, all my other retirement devices are knackered. And what's really fascinating about the BlackBerry launch, I'm going to talk about a couple of different things, whether it's a product or a service, is nobody wanted BlackBerry when we launched it. The amount of times I stood in front of really senior teams and they looked at it and went, it's a lovely toy, but it's never really going to catch on. Like, Neville, do you honestly think anybody would ever benefit from like getting email on a phone? Are you mad? I get email on my computer, that's all I need. And nobody understood the value, and we couldn't sell them. We really struggled at launch. We had them before anybody else. We had the original device. We brought them in from Canada. We couldn't sell them. Nobody would touch them. And what happened is we started giving them out for trial periods. And it was when a customer phoned me from Germany and said, hey, Neville, I've just got off a plane and I've got all my email and I've answered them. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it does. I'm pleased you've understood how it works. That's really good. But why are you phoning me? He said, no, you don't get it. He said, normally now I would be catching a taxi to my hotel. I'd be plugging my laptop in to dial up over a phone line. Remember them phone lines in hotels? I'd go off and have dinner. I might get 2 or 3 emails downloaded. I might get a chance to respond to 1 or 2 things before I go to bed. He said, with your lovely, funny little device, I've responded to everybody. I'm on top of everything. I'm off for a beer. And one of the big lessons we realized really early on is you have to see things from your client's perspective. And everybody says this, everybody's, oh, we're really client-centric. We focus on our customers. We see their world. I've got really big news for you. You can't as a human being. But what you need to do is challenge yourself to drop your preconceptions and assumptions and start understanding why your consumers use your products, your services, and what the ultimate benefit is for them. So for me, and I'm going to be a tiny bit controversial here, because I like being a tiny bit controversial, it's not about what customers want. The biggest myth in business is everybody thinks it's about what customers want. What we learned with BlackBerry and Dyson and so many other things is it's about what does this customer want this time? What's their frame of reference? Where's their benefit? What does it mean to them right now? And if you don't get that bit, you aren't going to get that engagement, that relationship that Bob was mentioning at the start, and that ongoing piece of development. So lesson number 1, see the world from their perspective, understand what's important to them. The second bit, and Bob mentioned Dyson. Dyson obviously is still around, still being a bit more successful than BlackBerry, so it's probably one to kind of focus a little bit more on. And again, we had this at launch. We had exclusive rights. This is me being right place, right time, by the way. It's not some sort of business genius. I thought the ironing board that had 2 fans underneath to help you iron more effectively was going to be bigger than Dyson. It turns out it wasn't, and I was wrong, and I can't judge new products. The fascinating lesson that we learned with Dyson when we launched the DC01 was, again, the fact that nobody wanted it. It was so revolutionary at the time. It was cutting edge design. It was the clear bin had never, and the clear bin really put people off. It's like, God, I can see the dirt I'm collecting. That's horrible. When they understood that was a benefit, oh my God, I can see the dirt I'm collecting. That's fantastic. That was a game changer. There's lots of lessons from Dyson, but the big one I want to share with you today is the price of it. So when retailers first saw this one, God, it's horrible, it's ugly, it's see-through, it's got this grey plastic and bright yellow. Honestly, you're having a laugh. I bet it's cheap. And you'd go, actually, it's £199 at retail. And in that environment at that time, the average price of a Hoover, and I will say Hoover, was £71. And we hit the marketplace with a product that was 3 times that price. And I was curious about this. I thought this is a fascinating bit. When you get the value right from a client's perspective or a consumer's perspective, the price kind of melts away. And I look back, and the fascinating analogy and comparison is with flat screen TVs. So when Philips launched a flat screen TV about the same sort of time, they were about 10,000 quid. About a year in, you get them for about 3,000. And when I popped on Curry's website this morning, a 42-inch flat screen telly in a brand, not one of the cheap and cheerful things, is like £299, whereas Dyson is 350 quid. So the big lesson with Dyson is, if you can clearly define value from a customer's perspective, you can maintain and build and grow that value to maintain and build great customer relationships and great businesses. So how do you go about doing that? Well, for me, and this is one of my favorite things, we get asked to do lots of really complex things with national and international sales teams, business development teams. We do some really clever pieces around language patterning and communication and below consciousness for consumers and sellers. But most of the time, most folks don't need that. Most of the time, most folks need to learn to do the basics and do them extraordinarily well. And that starts from not making assumptions about what clients, customers, or consumers want, but actually developing a real sense of questioning and really understanding and digging in and listening. I'm doing a session with a bank in 2 weeks' time, and we're doing just a half day on questioning, just questioning, nothing else, just questioning techniques. We actually have about 3 days of content on how you go about questioning effectively to really understand what's going on with your consumers, your clients, and your customers. But for me, letting go of assumptions and focusing on them and their world and digging into that, that's doing the basics and doing them extraordinarily well. The next bit is just to have a plan, just to understand, just to stop and think. Because for me, a lot of the time, people don't have a plan, don't have a direction, and don't understand what they want to achieve as a business. And I see people all the time. So I see some really big and successful businesses that really don't have a clear strategy. And when I go in and do some of the stuff that I do and ask, well, what's the 5-year game plan? Well, we haven't really thought of that yet. Or what are you looking to achieve? What's the out? Oh, I don't know. We haven't got there. And then when we go beyond the strategy and look at an operational plan, most businesses that we speak to don't have an operational plan to really deliver the business development that they want. They have this aspiration, they have a number, but they don't have a really good structure in terms of how they go about doing that. So the best organizations we see take some time, take some effort, and really kind of zoom into how they build a plan. And they build a plan collectively and collaboratively with their team and understand where they want to go and the ultimate output and outcome for the strategy. And then we help them by creating plans. And for us, one of the things that's really effective, and we're getting asked a lot about at the minute, is just a simple 12-week plan. And a simple 12-week plan can really help you and your team focus in on what you need to achieve. And why 12 weeks? Well, I suppose for us, 12 weeks is a great time scale. It's long enough to do some really big things and move some big numbers and move some big opportunities forward, but it's short enough to correct things if things aren't working effectively. So again, with the groups that we're working with at the minute, we're helping them create and refine an ongoing plan. And I want to share you one part of that I found to be more and more powerful, hence the little slide in this little piece about network. And this is a fantastic little piece that we've just we almost stumbled on this. I'm going to be honest, we almost stumbled on this, but we talk about, and Bob mentioned this at the start, which is fantastic, keeping in contact, keep that communication going, keeping that piece of focus. Well, what's really fascinating is most people don't, we're back to there's nothing in life you have to do, don't focus and connect with their network on a regular basis. So here's a little kind of a challenge for you. We're a Thursday now, so by the end of Friday might be a challenge, but let's say by this time next week, can you dive into your phone? And I'm guessing, I'm looking, I bet Martin has at least 6 people in his phone, possibly more. And I bet Chris has got at least a dozen people. Oh, he's got 7. Hang on, Chris might have even more. What's fascinating is we have these lists of names and numbers in our phone, and we seem to have got really hung up on a Zoom or a Teams or whatever else, and we've forgotten the beautiful art of just picking up the phone, and not to try and do business, by the way. I don't want you to phone up and go, oh, do you want anything? Because that's just a bit naff. What I do want you to do is that Bob mentioned, creating that connection, just building that relationship, communicating. Just pick up the phone and say, hey, how's things? What's new with you? And I challenged a group at the start of the year to do this. And again, it was done and positioned with them not to try and get business. We call it who's in your phone exercise. And after 2 weeks, a guy came back to me and said, do you know what? Phoned 10 people. He chose 10. He said, spoke to 6 of them. I haven't managed to get a hold of 4 yet. And he said, do you know, bizarrely, I phoned them all and just said, hey, how you doing? It's a bit tough. What's going on? What's new with you? What's new with your business? All those conversations. He said, I've got a major new contract starting 3 months' time. He said, the guy that I spoke to had completely forgotten we offer this service. And just by starting that conversation, just by communicating back into the network, it's such a powerful tool. It gets you to where you need to be. The second bit around the plan, I'm sharing some real nuggets here, so I hope this is really useful for you. We do a little exercise called 25 and 10. So, and I'm just, this is if you deal with other businesses. And what we encourage you to do is sit down with you and your team, or if it's just you, that's fine, and make a note of 25 businesses that you really want to work with that you aren't currently. And why would you do that? Well, actually, that process makes you answer some really big questions. Who do you want as customers or clients? And actually, that's a really fascinating bit of focus. Yeah, once you start asking those questions, who do I really want to work with? And remember, there is nothing in life you have to do. So you can go, actually, do I want to work with them? No, I don't. Do I want to work with them? I'd love to work with them. That process for you or for you and your team really helps clarify and solidify your thinking around business development. And then where do you take that? And this is the bit that we've learned through some research. Having a list of 25 is a bit challenging. So out of that list of 25, narrow it down to 10. Which 10 organizations are you going to try and start a conversation with in the next 12 weeks? And the lovely example, when the first time we did this was 7 years ago, I remember this vividly, with a group of people, about 15, 17 people in a room, 2 of us running a session, back when you could be in a room with people, I remember that, post-it notes and all that stuff, and hands covered in pen. I miss those days. And what was really nice is we divide them in half, and we asked both groups to create a list of 25. That's where we started. And the group on my right-hand side had the CEO in. So naturally, if you're going to do a debrief when you're running a workshop, you start with the CEO group, because that's the important one. And the CEO, she stood there and she's like, number 1 on our list is this company here, and number 2 on our list is this company here. And in the other group, the group on my left, there was this is genuine, there was a girl who worked part-time on reception and hadn't said a word in the workshop all morning. And out of nowhere, as the CEO said, this is our number 2 target, really focused, we absolutely want to be in there. This girl who worked on reception part-time said, my brother-in-law's CEO there. And the CEO of this organization room went, well, why didn't you ever tell me? And this poor girl in reception, who was as quiet as a mouse, suddenly went, why didn't you ever ask? If you'd asked, and she left my workshop at that point, which isn't the first time, by the way, but she went and she picked the phone up and she phoned that person and said, right, my brother-in-law will see you any day next week other than Tuesday. And what fascinates me is this focus, this clarity for you and your team comes out of these discussions. So which of the 25 organizations you want to work with, filter it down to 10, display it somewhere so everybody can see and use it and make value with it, and then start telling each other. You've got a network that's really powerful around you. Bring your plan to life. Tell your the folks that you work with, your network, sometimes even your current customers, your suppliers, folks that support you in your business. They'll be able to help with introductions and suggestions that will help you get that next customer. So that little bit of focus, having that plan, absolutely critical. So I did say this is going to be a real quick canter through this morning. Just a couple of things I want to remind you of, and then let's just kind of, I want to dig into these so you take these pieces away and you've absolutely got them. And then we'll open for questions. And when we open for questions, by the way, I'm really good at 80s music or motorsport. So either of those kind of questions would be great this morning. Please feel free. So the couple of things that I really want you to think about is, and this is a bit big to start with. This is my there's nothing in life you have to do. What are the things that you're doing, and what are the things that you're avoiding at the minute? And equally, ask that of your team. Are there things that you need to be doing for business development you're not currently? Are there things that you really need to dig into that you're not? And one of the really interesting pieces for me is we worked with a team down in London a little while ago, and we did this whole behavioural bit for the first half day, and everybody left the room, and I asked the CEO, and he said, do you know what, I'm sat listening to you talking, and we're all going, yes, we need to do this stuff. He said, do you know what, there's a customer I've been putting off phoning. Well, why haven't you phoned? I said, tell you what, I'll go and get a cup of tea, phone him. He said, I can't. He works in the Middle East. They don't work today. I can't phone him today. All right, okay. I said, well, just give me a ring next week and let me know how you've done. And he phoned me the following week, as promised. And he said, oh, you know, that customer. Yeah, I said, go on, have you phoned him? He said, no. I said, why not? He said, you know what? He said, I was too embarrassed to admit there was 3 customers I should have phoned, and I just haven't. And I phoned all 3, didn't get one of them because we haven't tracked them down yet. He said, we've secured those 2 bits of business, but I'd been putting off making that phone call. Great. Once you recognize that and take ownership, that's a really important thing to do to bring this to life. The next big piece that we talked about, and this is the BlackBerry piece, see things from a client's perspective. What do they value in what you do, and how do they use it? Because how you sell it and how they buy it are 2 really different parts of the same equation. You need to understand why they bought from you and why your service or why your product adds value to their life. Most of the time, most organizations miss that completely. Then it's not about price, and this is the Dyson example, and it comes out right the way through, and it's a scary and big concept at the minute, but it is absolutely about the value. If you get the value piece right, the price often just melts away into the background. It's just not important when the value is there. At the next point, and I don't really need to show this slide because I know you've all written it down, and you don't know, you haven't written it down because I can't assume. I need to ensure that we don't assume in any stage at any point. We need to absolutely ensure that we don't assume, that we ask, that we remain professionally curious in everything we do. Bob said at least 50% of you are 50% of that statement, professional or curious. You can decide which box you fit into. I know where some of them fit, that's fine. So not assuming, but really genuinely asking brilliant questions, and most importantly, listening to what consumers, customers, or clients have to say is critical. And then lastly, we need that plan, we need that strategy, we need to understand, we need to have clarity as we reach that light at the end of the tunnel, the time tunnel piece. We kind of know roughly where we're going when we get out, but we still get a little bit startled. Let's have a plan, let's have a clear strategy that's communicated extraordinarily well, and these things really, really help you achieve your goals. And I'm going to finish where I started. There is nothing in life you have to do at all. Honestly, I love to have this discussion, perhaps over a cup of tea, or even, heaven forbid, over a beer at some point with some of you. And what's fascinating for me is those 5 things I've shared with you today. You don't need to do any of them. Honestly, take away today and just, don't do a single one. But if you do choose to do them, you will find that you'll create a focus on business development, and you'll make the most of the opportunities that the light at the end of the tunnel represent. So thanks for that, folks. I think I'm handing back to Bob for questions.
Thanks, Nev. That was amazing. So really appreciate your talk there. I'm just going to flip back to So does anybody have any questions for Nevil?
I think I might have frightened everybody by saying questions are so important and we spend so much time on questions. But feel free, dive in.
I've got one if nobody else wants one. It's Martin here.
Go for it.
Nevil, I think your story about the receptionist whose brother worked at that or ran that company is really interesting. Yeah, I always try, if I'm making an elevator pitch anywhere, to be very specific.
Yes.
Because I think, and this is more of an observation than a question, sorry, but I think by focusing in on the type of business and giving an example of the business, you're narrowing down when you're asking an audience for intros to people from a generic kind of field to a specific, they might not know that one, but they might know their direct competitor, which presumably is also a great intro to you as well. And so I think if you can be as specific as possible, it does really help.
It does. And Martin, we have a real life example of that. We wanted to get into one of the big banks, one of the high street banks. And so we said, oh, I don't know that bank, but I know somebody at another high street bank. Would that be useful? I'm like, yeah, can you? Yeah. And that's the bit, the more specific you can make your ask and your question. And again, this is the focus bit. Think about that. This is focusing your thinking and your communications. The more that will spill over and people introduce you to the right kind of clients. So yeah, absolutely spot on. More specific, the better. Fab.
Great. Well, if there's no further questions for Nevil, I think we'll move on. So thanks again, Nev. That was really, really great stuff. Now, we thought that it would be remiss of us if we did not express a word or two of caution at this time. Firstly, there's a danger of complacency. Just because the Bank of England has published positive forecasts does not mean that you and your business will automatically benefit from the upturn in the economy. You need to work at it. You need to build on the advice that Nevil's just given us. And you need to remember two old tropes. To truly take advantage of the opportunities out there, you need to adapt and innovate. If you do what you've always done, you get what you've always gotten. But beware, if your competitors innovate and adapt and you don't, you may actually lose market share to them. And doing what you've always done may actually result in less than you've always gotten. And next, the old definition of insanity is that's often attributed to Einstein is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Be imaginative, innovative, creative, and enthusiastic in exploiting the opportunities that are out there. And the next word of caution may seem surprising, but it involves the government assistance that we generally find to have been essential during the pandemic. The problem as we see it is that the receipt of local authority grants, business rate relief, and the coronavirus job retention scheme, otherwise referred to as furlough, has distorted the bottom line results of many companies who may have been lulled into a false sense of security as a result and may be overconfident as restrictions are lifted and as this support is wound down. Also, some companies have, quite rightly in many cases, taken advantage of government-backed loans and VAT and pay-as-you-earn deferral, all of which needs to be repaid and should be factored into cash flow forecasts. And lastly, in order to take full advantage of potential growth in your business, you need to be confident that relevant resources will be available to you in terms of cash, people, and supplies of raw materials and stock. And this may involve some serious strategic planning. So, whilst we're here today to encourage you to make the most of opportunities that are opening up, I never tire of using this old cliche. Turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but shout it from the rooftops, cash is king. There's no point in chasing turnover growth if that turnover is not profitable. And even if your business is profitable, you can still go bust if you don't get paid in a timely manner. So this is my rather contrived segue into introducing our next guest, Chris Turner. Chris is Head of Strategic Partnerships and Channel at Chaser, which is an excellent and leading software product designed to assist businesses to efficiently collect money owed to them by their customers. And we're thrilled that Chris has agreed to join us this morning for a brief chat. I'll just go back a page there. I shall stop sharing, and yeah, there's Chris. So welcome, Chris, and thanks for joining us. I promise this will be more of a friendly fireside chat and not a mastermind style grilling.
Fantastic, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Chris, I've just made a lame attempt at describing Chaser, but perhaps I can put it to you. What is Chaser?
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. And yeah, just again, thanks everybody for having me on today. It's great to be here. So I guess if we start off, let's look at the problem that Chaser tries to address really, which is, as you mentioned earlier, businesses spend countless hours manually and ineffectively chasing invoices. It's kind of fact that we see in day-to-day SME life across the board. So we've been about for about 5 or 6 years now, and our whole mantra is effectively been dedicated to try and solve this late payment problem there's non-payment terms. So what Chaser does as a platform is we automatically and intelligently send email chasers with a view of supporting SMEs to get in time, but critically without losing the human touch. And again, that's what we try to do at Chaser, and I'll come on to this a little bit more now. But we're a cloud-based piece of software. We automate this accounts receivables process and speed up debt collection. We integrate with software platforms, accounting platforms, Xero, typically, but other accounting software like QuickBooks, Sage, FreeAgent, Microsoft Dynamics, and Accounts IQ. And ultimately, what Chaser allows is users to configure and customize payment reminder schedules, which are sent, and you can send up to unlimited reminders and sending times to your customers. So you've got this flexible kind of way of chasing late payment. We've recently released a new feature which allows users to set up payment plans, which allow our users to chase installments, particularly at this moment in time, maybe struggling in terms of being able to pay overdue invoices. So a recent feature we've kind of released there. I guess, Bob, we also act as a CRM, ultimately, the customer relationship management side of the accounts receivables function. So we consolidate all the communications between the user and their debtors in our CRM function within the platform. And this includes things like chased emails, email responses, logs of phone calls, and notes to other team members across the board. Yeah, I guess finally, as a platform perspective, invoices that are overdue can be escalated to our kind of friendly in-house collections team, who'll pursue that debt on a no-win, no-fee basis as well. And then we partner with leading solicitors as well, if that debt wants to get taken further up the line. So, yeah, as I mentioned before, we've been about since 2014. We've got over 400 five-star reviews with a top-rated credit control app on the Xero App Store. And our customers tell us typically Chaser enables them to save around 15 hours a week on credit control, reduce their debtor days by about 16 days, and reduce their days sales outstanding by a quarter. So a bit about Chaser there.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Now, I'm sure that you guys are well placed to answer this, but so that we can get a bit of context, typically what's the value of cash tied up in overdue debtors in the UK?
And as you'd imagine, Bob, great question. It's quite considerable. So if we look at it from a UK perspective, there's 5.6 million micro businesses roughly in the UK who employ below 10 staff, which account actually for 96% of all businesses within the UK. And collectively, they turn over almost $1 trillion a year, which obviously is phenomenal numbers there. So back in early 2020, Tide did some analysis across the SME and small business space, and it was estimated that 50 billion was owed to UK SMEs back at this time, which obviously over the challenges over the last year since the onset of the pandemic, this has been exacerbated. The Chartered Institute of Credit Management actually estimate that these late payments have increased by over 200%, 209% since the World Health Organization kind of stated it was a pandemic. So it's now estimated around 225 billion is actually owed to UK SMEs, which, you know, an absolute phenomenal number, which obviously has a huge impact. And, you know, let's be quite clear about it. It's one of the core reasons why SMEs going out of business. They don't have the cash in to effectively be able to run their business efficiently, effectively, and profitably. I guess for those who do get paid and do get paid late, problems are compounded within their business. Things like difficulty forecasting, difficulty planning ahead, which stifles business growth, slower job creation as an example within there, and creates that kind of reliance on debt and equity financing rather than actually getting paid on time for the jobs or services that they've actually provided.
Yeah, some scary numbers in there, Chris, but it's absolutely right. So what's the average amount of time taken for invoices to be paid in the UK?
So it varies, again, very much industry to industry, and it changes very much over time. I guess there's some recent YouGov research that showed over 60% of UK medium-sized businesses receive late payments at least once a month. And actually, Xero did some work back with PayPal back in 2019, and it was estimated 48% of all invoices in the SME space are paid late. So as invoices grow older, it becomes more and more harder, as we'd imagine, for businesses to actually recover what they're owed, which ultimately results in the business spending time doing these kind of manual, ineffective tasks of trying to chase debt, which in turn kind of removes focus from the primary business objective, which, as we talked before, is growing turnover and, as you quite eloquently put before, Bob, obviously driving the profitability of the business. So businesses vary very much. I mean, I guess what's been hit hard at the minute, the hospitality sector, have actually seen now there's some research done back in March, and the CIM has said only 5 industry sectors within the UK have seen improvements on days beyond terms. Hospitality sector, the average is 35.7 days beyond terms, and that's an increase of 12 days when compared to December last year. So we'd understand, obviously, at this moment in time, with everything and the impacts of the pandemic, that industry's been hit. But then also the industry sector called business from home is also seeing severe customer delays, averaging around 34 to 35 days beyond terms for the same period. So again, some big impacts across the board there in terms of, obviously not being able to support our business's cash flow.
Yeah. So what would you say could be the costs of mishandled credit control for SMEs?
Well, we know, Bob, and it's another great question here. Roughly 50,000 businesses go out of business each year, and it's often not having, or it's due to not having the cash that they're actually owed in their business. Mm-hmm. And it's often the very smallest of companies who bear the brunt here across the board. More than half of small businesses have used their own savings or friends' money to kind of keep their businesses afloat because of late payments. And I guess the other costs within the business are there's kind of times and efforts wasted, really, if I don't have good credit control processes in place. Ultimately, chasing invoices is a manual, ineffective task. It's hugely onerous for any business and very costly. I've got to have a human actually doing that chasing, which is obviously cost for me within the business. And in an ideal world, I'd like that human to be doing more value-adding tasks within the business going forward. Mm-hmm. We see things like the age debt is not improving, which impacts cash flow, balance sheet, profitability. But even down to the level, businesses not having the funds in to pay other critical expenses. So, for example, paying their staff, which obviously is one of the core reasons why businesses exist and why they need to be in place. And, if they have a late payment that's not due and they can't pay their staff, how can the business move going forward? I think from the research we've done, we see small businesses typically spend over 300 hours a year on manual kind of labor intensive tasks like this in terms of chasing late payments. And, a third of business owners typically say that they are affected by the volume of administrative tasks that they have to kind of get on with on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah.
Okay. So this is quite a similar sort of question, but what would you say was the importance of credit management and accounts receivables in any business?
Yeah, no, another great question there. And I think it's no great kind of insight that many businesses are having a super tough time kind of right now. And I think we've covered it today. And, the whole ethos of the light at the end of the tunnel really is kind of, brought it to light in terms of what businesses can do going forward. And as articulated by yourself and Nevil today. But as I mentioned before, this estimated 209% rise in overdue invoices, even in good times, it's important to maintain consistent cash flow, as we all know, and avoid wasting time chasing payments, especially for the smaller businesses. So I guess if we rewind back kind of 12 or 13 years, what we learned after the 2008 crash was when a recession comes around, getting paid on time is more crucial than ever. Anticipated cash flow is what allows a business to function in a competitive market. Many people believe that expansion is one of the biggest fears from a business, but often, as you'll know, it's the lack of working capital that sinks many companies. And this can often be due to an ineffective accounts receivable process. So ultimately, having effective accounts receivable processes in place allows you as a business owner to get paid faster and therefore allows you to pay your own suppliers faster. And results in things like avoiding late payment fees, improving your own business credit rating, and gaining more opportunities in terms of to invest in the growth of your business. I guess automating the accounts receivable function involves getting customers to pay for your goods or services in a timely fashion. And that sounds super, super simple. In a perfect world, everybody would pay on time exactly when they're supposed to. You'd never have to spend a minute kind of chasing any late payments. But I guess if 2020's taught us anything, we don't live in a perfect world. Our customers have the same cash flow problems that we have as consumers as well. And it's often a juggle between kind of ensuring we keep those relationships smooth and putting pressure on what's due to be paid for what's due to our business ultimately. Our customers at Chaser tell us that automating their accounts receivable process takes that pain away from getting paid on time, letting them save this time on undertaking manual tasks while maintaining great customer relationships.
Well, that's brilliant. That's been really informative, Chris. So I think what we'll do now is invite any questions from the audience.
Can I ask first if that's okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Chris, you mentioned about the kind of keeping it personal piece. Could you just give me an example of how you do that? Because I know you've explained a few bits there, but one of the bits I get concerned at when I look at this kind of software is, and this kind of process, I think it's a great idea, but how do I keep it really personal? What can I really do to make that come to life?
Sure. No, it's a great question, Neville. And I guess how we call it, the software is automated, but we call it automated humanity. So every feature in the Chaser app has been purpose-built to make sure your customers never know you're actually using an automated system. And we do this because we know that customers are much more likely to respond or take notice to email reminders that look hand-typed. So within Chaser, chasing emails will always come from your regular email address, rather than, for example, if you're using a software package like Xero or QuickBooks coming from the automated @Xero or @Intuit email addresses, that payment reminders would come through from there. And you can personalize this with your own branding and email signature, so ultimately it looks exactly like it was sent from somebody internally. Any responses and replies to that debt chasing will land directly in the sender's inbox as well as the CRM system. And the whole ethos behind this is obviously by saying or by personalizing these emails, that we find our users tell us they have a much more higher response in terms of responses versus a true automated email coming in place. We do things like we group multiple invoices together. So if you were sending an invoice to a consumer, you wouldn't send individual invoices, you'd group them together into the same email. And we have the functionality within there to actually recognize multiple overdue invoices, which will send them in the same invoice together. And emails can also be customized to send at different cadences at different times. And again, ultimately, with the whole ethos of not looking automated, which is a big red flag, and typically where people, or debtors in this case here, would ignore those emails. So hopefully, Neville, that's answered some of your questions there.
It has. Great. Thank you.
We have a question. How long does it take to implement?
From a Chaser perspective, very little time, to be honest. It's very simple to do. You connect your account software into the platform. It will sync and pull all your customer and invoice information into Chaser. You can start chasing ultimately straight away from there, but probably spend a few hours setting up, and we can support around that. You know, our team will be able to support around setting up the schedules and the templates, but it's quite self-explanatory within there. You can ultimately get started straight away, so it's not hugely onerous task.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. So if there's no, I think we might have another question here. So yes, I guess we need to know that the accounts and bookkeeping is up to date in order to run this effectively. So invoices need to be raised efficiently and cash allocated on time.
Yeah, so what Chaser does, it syncs on the hour, every hour with the bookkeeping application. There's a sync button in there as well, but it also syncs a minute before chasing emails are due to be sent as well. So ultimately, as long as everything's up to date in Xero or in the other bookkeeping application, everything's up to date within Chaser as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I think at this point, we'll hand over to Jack to take us through some growth tools.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, so I'll rattle through this as quickly as possible. First of all, just to echo what Bob said, it's been some really useful advice coming both from Neville and Chris, and particularly like to thank Neville because he's bang on. That sounds very rude. Not at all. He's he's talked a lot about focus and having a plan, which is something that I'll be kind of touching on a little bit as well. It's also clear from, you know, the data that's Bob's presented that there's certainly plenty more confidence and optimism, both kind of in the national and local economies. And with that will obviously bring opportunities, and that's a good thing. But similarly, that we're encouraging you not maybe to continue on with the status quo, we also want to avoid a situation almost where you're trying to change too much too quickly and almost trying to pivot your entire business overnight. So you can leave this webinar and say, right, we're going to break into this market or in this region, and while we're at it, we're going to bring our installation or development in-house, and while we're at it, we're going to launch 4 new products in the next month. You'll find in that kind of scenario, you're not actually going to get a huge amount done, despite, you know, the ambition behind it. So therefore, I kind of want to show a couple of tools that we're using with our clients in the Business Accelerate department, which will hopefully help you, first of all, identify and prioritize those key strategic areas, you know, which will provide the most benefit to your business, as well as kind of a pro forma for how you can get a simple yet effective kind of rolling 90-day plan of action, which will really focus your growth and improvement. And secondly, there's a Nevil tool which we'll be looking at, which will kind of hopefully provide a more effective way of setting those turnover targets and forecasting your future sales. So as you can see on the slide at the moment, we have our one-page plan one-page business plan tool. As I said, this is kind of really useful for, you know, pulling together a real concise and clear action plan, which gets you to consider those strategic areas of most importance, you know, be it in terms of urgency, in terms of time, or the benefit that it will have to your business. And this has been designed to really reflect what we call the Mindshop School of Business Strategy, and which at the heart of it has a very kind of simple philosophy behind it, which is this now, where, how principle. And this basically states that, apologies if some people have already heard about this, or because we do talk about it quite a lot on other webinars and blog posts, etc. But essentially it states that, you know, effective business strategy can only be delivered where you understand where you are at the moment and where you want to be, because only then will you fully understand kind of what changes need to happen in order to, you know, close that gap between the two. So if we look at these boxes in a little bit more detail, we have on the top left-hand side, we've got the now box, and this is generally populated with kind of 6 to 8 bullet points, you know, a nice mix of maybe financial information, such as your current turnover, you know, profit figures, cash, net assets, whatever you think is relevant, as well as some non-financial information in there, which may state kind of things like the number of employees you've got at the moment, and maybe some current pain points you have within the business. Something like, we don't currently have a sales process, or our CRM system's very poor, or employee morale's quite low. Anything that kind of really paints that a current snapshot of what your business looks like. And then on the top right-hand side, we're kind of using those same financial and non-financial information to kind of state where you want the business to look, what you want the business to look like in 3 years' time. So a lot of you, I imagine, will be wanting to have an increase in turnover, profit, maybe you have a specific cash figure in mind, as well as fixing some of those issues you have currently in the business. And you may also want to be putting in here any personal goals that you have, you know, such as maybe I want to pay off the mortgage in 5 years' time, or, you know, have this company ready for resale. Just these kind of hopes and aspirations for the future that you really want to realize in the future of the business. And then that kind of pushes you on to the how, which is at the bottom there. And this is kind of where you know how you're going to close that gap between the two. You know, how am I going to get my business from a £1 million turnover a year to £3 million, or how am I going to get to a position where I can increase my workforce from 10 to 20 employees? And we go about that by kind of splitting it between these 3 wider strategic areas on the left-hand side, which is kind of looking at the areas in a macro kind of place, such as sales. And then these are in turn split down into kind of individual action points. And these kind of really are things that can be done, you know, within a 90-day time period, which can really make an incremental improvement in that strategic area. So if we were looking at sales again, maybe you'd be looking at designing that sales process, or maybe looking into new CRM systems, or perhaps possibly getting looking at getting some sales training, set up within your that department. And the point is that these specific action points are allocated to specific individuals within that relevant department, and they're given a deadline to meet those action points. And this is done to really promote the accountability of individuals within your business, and really minimize that risk of these sort of strategic plans being, stagnating and drifting and nothing actually getting done. It really drives forward the growth and improvement that you want to put through the business. And I suppose this is the point of the one-page plan, is that it's a dynamic document. It's not meant to be static. It's something that you prepare and you don't put in a drawer. It's something that you're always referring back to and amending when you're making those small incremental improvements to the business. Then you're looking at, well, what can we do next and what can we do after that? And the logic behind it is that if you start ticking off these individual action points, then you're going to making improvements in that strategic area, to the point where suddenly that strategic area isn't something that you necessarily need to focus on. There may be some other areas that you want to look at instead. And that's kind of how this is a constantly rolling document. Sort of alongside doing this strategic work, there's also probably some long-term financial forecasting that's going to be happening in the background, maybe preparing profit and loss balance sheet or cash flow forecasts, or maybe all three of them simultaneously. And for those who do them, I can appreciate that probably it's been quite difficult to forecast things given the recent unpredictability, shall we say, or that's happened over the past year or so. And this tends to why people kind of almost pick figures out of the air without any real rhyme or reason to it. So if we look onto the next slide, we have our income matrix, which is it's been designed to add hopefully a bit more logic to this target setting process. So how we effectively use this tool is that the first thing that we do is that we prepare an income matrix for the current year that we're in, which has all of the current year results in. So we start by, on the left-hand side, we're filling in kind of our individual products and services column. I appreciate this may be easier for some people's businesses as opposed to other who may perhaps have few products or services that they're providing to customers, but there will be some way, hopefully some way of sensibly lumping together service lines into kind of bigger chunks as opposed to filling out 1,000 different individual products. Similarly, once we filled out all of our products and services, we need to attribute a unit cost to them. And again, this may be easier for some businesses as opposed to others. Some people may not have a set price, but we can use kind of averages when we're doing this process. And the next thing that we do is that we need to really effectively segment our current customer base into, obvious and useful sectors. And this can be done in any number of ways. It could be done in terms of like customer size or type. So you may have in those columns there under client mix, like SMEs, not-for-profits, PLCs, government organizations, etc. Or you may want to go down the route of geographical locations, either on an international basis in terms of individual sales areas like the UK, US, EU, rest of the world, etc. Or maybe on a more regional basis like Northeast, Northwest, Scotland, London, etc. However, whichever way you split it though, what you need to do then is kind of note down within the matrix the number of customers that you have within each one of these different sectors. So the logic is from that point is that if you multiply across the grid, you should get your total sales for each individual service line across the year, and then add that down, and that gives you your total sales for the year. So that gives you the current picture. And that next thing we're doing is we're preparing another income matrix, but this time this is set for 12 months time. And we're doing this one in reverse order this time. So as we're actually starting from our total sales target that we set for that year, as well as kind of considering, what particular areas of focus we want to be taking into the next 12 months, which products and services do we really want to be focusing in on? And we'll be flexing our, our targets based on that. So, and the idea is that we're working back from that figure. So from that, we need to work out kind of how many customers do we need to have in each individual sector and each individual product and service line to get back to that get back to that annual target that we've just set. And the logic behind this is it's meant to provide a bit of clarity to what you actually need to achieve in order to hit those targets, because a lot of the times it's just kind of a figure plucked out of the air. There's no real logic or thought put into it other than we need to grow by 5%, but we don't really think about where that 5% is going to come from. And obviously, at the point where we prepared the current figure and the future figure, there's a comparison that can be made, and that can really facilitate a discussion about, so what do we need to focus on? What individual action points do we need to put in place in order to ensure that we're actually going to hit those targets? Do we need to put more time into our networking around our SME area? Do we need to put more salespeople into the Northwest? You know, these could be real action points that come out of this exercise of preparing an income matrix. And this can really filter into a one-page business plan as well. So the two tools are really well linked together. So that's kind of my chat on the tools. So just to wrap everything up, I see the time, so we'll try and get this done as quickly as possible. So as it says here, you know, the important things in terms of next steps is getting started now. There's you know, we've had plenty of time. We've had plenty of time within this pandemic, but ultimately, there's plenty of opportunity out there to get stuck on with it, essentially. As I said, you know, Nev's also given you a bit of homework here in terms of going down and pulling together those 10 clients that you want to really focus on working on in the future. Similarly, we'd like you to kind of think about these three kind of strategic areas of real importance to the business that you want to focus on over the next 90 days. You may be off-putting to the fact that you're actually noticing a problem which is going to cause some pain in the short term to try and fix, but it's also an opportunity to make that real improvement. And as it says at the end, it's kind of doing nothing really shouldn't be an option. This is providing a fantastic opportunity to basically rip up the rule book for us and, you know, start again from scratch and kind of really focus our business on how we want it to operate. So plenty of stuff to get on with and to think about. And if there's any other questions, feel free to fire away.
I think we'd probably best move on. Thanks, Jack. So as partners with the Global Buy One Give One initiative, we give back in a meaningful and impactful ways to help the UN achieve its global goals. And for every person who's attended our webinar today, we will donate 6 days of access to e-learning to children in India. So thank you to all delegates today.